Winter meetings are just a few days away, and for the Pittsburgh Pirates, could they target some of their rivals?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith. You can find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates during this offseason period. And the offseason period is about to pick up in full steam with winter meetings just a few days away. We're still getting Juan Soto news. We're still getting all kinds of news about players that are going to be available. So, before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Make sure you go download the Game Time app right now and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do indeed apply. So make sure that you go check out Game Time right now. If you want to go catch a Penguins game, a Steelers game, a concert, comedy, theater, anything you want, make sure you go do that. So we've already seen the Pirates lose Aroldis Chapman. We had that show on Tuesday. So thank you all for listening to that show, commenting, subscribing, liking, and sharing as you always do. Now, what is interesting about this offseason in particular for the Pittsburgh Pirates is the last couple, the needs were kind of clear, but there wasn't really that emphasis on, okay, if we fix these things as a team, this team could go places. I feel like that's the feeling around this Pittsburgh team right now is if they go get a first baseman, if they go get some bullpen help, if they go get another outfielder, I feel like the ceiling of this team just increases. And that's a big deal because if the ceiling for this team increases, folks, this is a wide open division again. I think Milwaukee is not going to bring back Willy Adames in free agency. You very well could see them move on from another player that I'm going to talk about in the second segment of today's show. But there are a lot of rumors circulating already about players on the move. And we have seen some in the NL Central already. Now, when we're going through this show about targeting rivals and figuring out what kind of players the Pirates could be going after here in the division, some are going to be free agents. So they're not really targeting a rival technically because they are indeed an unrestricted free agent, so they can go wherever they please, but they played for a division rival in 2024. Others are going to be trade targets. Now, I think the trade targets are going to be a little more appealing and more of the fact that you're going to have, what's the word I'm looking for? You're going to have a better feeling about the trade targets, I think, than you would the free agents. But I want to start with the home run that the Pirates could hit here. There is a real shot that this Pittsburgh Pirates team could hit a massive home run in the offseason if they can go and acquire a player within the division that this team has already said they want to move on from. And that player is, of course, Cody Bellinger, who is the thumbnail of the show. So you kind of probably assumed that the Cub over here was Cody Bellinger. Now, I saw other people kind of throw out Seiya Suzuki and throw out Ian Happ. Obviously, Ian Happ, a Pittsburgh native, so his name is always going to pop up when you're discussing players that could come from Chicago and go into Pittsburgh. Neither of those guys, to me, are really viable options, seeing as both of them do have no trade clauses in their contracts, meaning that they would have to waive those to go to another place. That is something they could potentially do. That is something that I think Seiya Suzuki and Ian Happ could very well do. I just don't know how much they'd want to do it, especially with the money that they're making and the fact that the Cubs are probably going to have to pick up the salary on any player they move. Now, not all of the salary, but some of it. The same goes for Cody Bellinger. But Cody Bellinger, on the other hand, does not have a no-trade clause. He does not have any of that going on. And we know Cody Bellinger is a phenomenal player. We just absolutely do. You look at what he did in 2024, 751 OPS, 18 home runs, 78 RBIs. The strikeout numbers have continued to come down from that horrific 2022 season that he had with the strikeout number. His career OPS is an 818. He's been just a phenomenal, consistent guy for the Chicago Cubs and the LA Dodgers. Obviously a former NL MVP, Rookie of the Year, I believe. All of that stuff. And when you look at Bellinger, he's 29, about to go on 30 soon. And he checks so many boxes for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. He just does. And you heard the needs that I mentioned earlier. First base, outfield, bullpen. Well, he's not a pitcher, so he's not going to help in the bullpen, but they can find that help elsewhere. The big thing and the big question that I have about Cody Bellinger is if the Pirates were indeed to do this, which is very rare. I mean, we've seen them make in-divisional trades before. Obviously, the most recent one being Kevin Newman to the Cincinnati Reds for Dauri Moreta. The Pirates clearly won that trade for the most part. But you don't see them make massive moves within the division. And this isn't something that's just out of the realm of possibility in this division at all to see guys move around. I mean, you saw Wilson Contreras become an unrestricted free agent and move on from the Chicago Cubs and go to the St. Louis Cardinals to replace Yadier Molina. You saw Craig Counsell, a manager from the Milwaukee Brewers, jump ship and go to the Chicago Cubs. You've seen it all over the place. And even the Pirates last offseason in free agency got a former Milwaukee Brewer and a former Chicago Cub and Cincinnati Red in Aroldis Chapman and Rowdy Tellez. So this is not something that's just out of the realm of possibility. But with Cody Bellinger specifically, I do think it's a little tough because the contract is substantial. And we know the Pirates are one of those teams that are not the big spender. They're not going to go out and commit to a lot of money. But when you look at his payroll in 2025, and hopefully, I don't know if Ethan Houlihan will listen to this, but I'm sure he has all that information somewhere. But via Spot Track, 27.5 is his payroll in 2025. That's substantial. That's a large commitment. But I do think that there's going to be a willingness from the Chicago Cubs to obtain some of that salary and retain some of that salary in a willingness to move on from Cody Bellinger and maybe sweeten the pot a little bit from a team that wants him to get some of their bigger prospects. Now, we've already seen other teams that are kind of involved in this already, like the New York Yankees, of course, who have a need at first base in the outfield, the Houston Astros, who are kind of still trying to keep up in this upper echelon of the American League, the Seattle Mariners, who are trying to break through. What's interesting here, too, with this contract is if you're trading for Cody Bellinger, especially in the division, you're going to get that in-division tax. So the in-division tax is going to be there. You're going to have to pay a little more. And he has a player option in 2026. It's $25 million that he can opt out into. He then becomes an unrestricted free agent in 2027. Is that a commitment the Pirates want to make? I think yes. I think you absolutely do. Because, again, going back to the first point I made about Bellinger, all the boxes that he checks for this team, he can play first base, which he's done well. He could be an outfielder, which he's done well. He could check two boxes and kill two birds with one stone here, folks. And yes, it would be a substantial amount probably in a trade. But when you look at all these other teams that are involved in this, reportedly, like the Astros, like the Yankees, like the Mariners, the Pirates absolutely have the most to offer via trade. You're looking at guys that could be feasible to Chicago prospect-wise, like a Xander Muth, a Thomas Harrington maybe. You could maybe move on from a Liover Peguero, who could slot in that middle infield if he wanted to, alongside Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson. And you don't really know what the plan is in Chicago. They want to move on from these guys in an effort to shed salary. So, again, they're going to want to shed some of this off. The Pirates would have to take on some of it, obviously. But I just think that this would be that slam dunk move that we've been begging the Pirates to make in an offseason for a very long time. Now, the likelihood of this happening, I don't think is absolutely high whatsoever, but I do think it is something that Ben Cherington in the front office should absolutely monitor. Just because it's in the division doesn't mean that it can't happen. And when you're looking at a player like Cody Bellinger, it's just hard to find a better fit for what the Pirates need. They need another left-handed power bat to pair with Brian Reynolds and O'Neal Cruz. Brian Reynolds, obviously a switch hitter, but he hits more from the left side. O'Neal Cruz is their best left-handed power hitter. They tried to do that with Rowdy Tellez. They've tried to do that with Jack Sawinski, and it just hasn't worked. Bellinger would just add another wrinkle to this lineup that would just give them exactly that. That would give them what they need. He could be their bona fide cleanup hitter. You're looking at a lineup that could feature, if you want, Andrew McCutchen leading off again, assuming he comes back. Brian Reynolds in that 2 spot that he absolutely loves. O'Neal Cruz at 3 and Bellinger at the 4 in the cleanup spot. That just cleans up that entire front part of that lineup. Then you're looking at guys like Joey Bart, who could bat 5 or 6. You're looking at a Ke'Bryan Hayes and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and then maybe another addition that you make. But he would just fill so many holes on this team that I think it's hard to not at least think about the Pirates playing around with this and trying to at least entice the Cubs a little bit to think about trading him within the division, because we don't know what direction Chicago's going in. Are they trying to rebuild? Are they trying to retool? We don't really know. For the Pirates, we know exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to get into that upper echelon of the National League Central, which again is a wide open division. And Bellinger checks the boxes for exactly what they need. He checks the boxes as a player. He checks the boxes on the side of the plate that he hits from and the positions that he plays. And he would just be that slam dunk move. And he has had success in PNC Park. He would have success in PNC Park with that short right porch to Clemente Wall. And it would just be a great move. And if you're telling me that all it would take would be a couple of these pitchers that we are holding on to, like a Harrington or a Xander Muth, and maybe 1 or 2 other prospects and one one MLB player, then I would do it. I don't think you hesitate at all. And then if you're only committing to him for a year, folks, that's fine, because he would just fix so many problems with this team. I mean, it would just be slam dunk, jumping for joy move for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, to the point where I don't even think you have to really worry about first base. And if the report is true that Brian Reynolds wants to play part-time at that position, or they want him to play part-time at that position, then you just slot Cody Bellinger into the outfield and let Brian Reynolds play the position when Bellinger isn't. That's all you got to do. And it just, to me, it almost makes too much sense, which is why I don't know if it'll happen. I think the likelihood of it happening is less than it actually is happening, but I do think it's something, again, that the front office needs to monitor. There's another marquee player within the division that could be on the move this offseason from the Milwaukee Brewers that also fits a need for this team. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All-in pricing allows you to see your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and their lowest price guarantee will credit you 110% of the difference, because Game Time ticket coverage is the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So if you're looking to go to a Steeler game or a Penguin game, concert, sports, comedy, theater, or anything else, make sure you go to Game Time right now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off, and download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, my name is Ethan Smith. Thank you for always tuning into the show, as you always do. Make sure you go listen to Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan. He is, of course, covering everything going on in the world of baseball this fabulous offseason. As the weather gets colder, slowly gets hotter. So don't worry. He has all of your needs for all of your MLB coverage over on our flagship show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So I talked at length about Cody Bellinger because I do think, again, slam dunk move would be phenomenal. Now, one of the other needs that I mentioned was, of course, the bullpen. This bullpen for the Pittsburgh Pirates was one of the units that we really weren't worried about going into 2024 because of the obviously getting Aroldis Chapman. We expected David Bednar and Colin Holderman to be their normal selves. They just weren't, and other pieces just didn't really gel. So this bullpen ended up being a massive negative for this team and almost one of the bigger negatives as the reason why they missed the postseason and why they fell out of contention in mid-August. So when you're looking around at how you can fill this bullpen, you obviously lose Aroldis Chapman. And in the division, Devin Williams is interesting. Now, hear me out. You guys are all probably thinking today, like, Ethan's off his rocker. He's wearing his all Georgia stuff. He's all ready for the SEC title game. He's off his rocker. Devin Williams is interesting here too. For the fact that, one, you know what you're getting with a guy like Devin Williams. Devin Williams, one of the better back-end bullpen arms in all of baseball, had a 1.25 ERA last year with a 1.4 WAR, career 8.9 WAR guy with a 1.83 ERA. We've seen him shut the Pirates down a lot. I mean, this guy has not had an ERA above a 2 since 2021. And even that year, it was a 2.5. The worst year that he really had was 2019, where he only played 13 games and had a 3.95 ERA. So this guy is elite. We know that. He's a big reason why Milwaukee has been so good for so long. He was obviously behind Josh Hader for a while before Hader got traded to the San Diego Padres. And now the Brewers, a team that does this notoriously, see that Devin Williams going on to this year has an estimate of 8.4 on his payroll via arbitration. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent after 2025. So now's the time to move on from him. This is what the Brewers do. Willy Adames goes to free agency. He's probably not going back to Milwaukee. He's going to get a massive price tag somewhere else. If you had to ask me, I think it's going to be in San Francisco, just to throw out a prediction. With Devin Williams, like Cody Bellinger, you're almost making a one-year commitment because you don't know if you're going to want to pay Devin Williams that top-end money that he's going to get after that. But if you're thinking about 2025, just 2025, Devin Williams is a player that you want because he supplants this bullpen. He adds structure to this bullpen more so than anything. And you're once again going into the season with a trio that you kind of trust. I mean, I know a lot of people lost trust in David Bednar and Colin Holderman in 2024 for good reason. I mean, they had not so great years, but David Bednar's season was not all terrible. It was bad, but it wasn't atrocious. Colin Holderman was dealing with injuries. David Bednar was too. But if you add a guy like Devin Williams, he could be a setup guy. He's done that across his career plenty of times. He's kind of shifted into that closer role now. So if you want to hand off the closer role to him, shift David Bednar into a setup role, that's something you can do. And David Bednar as well, another thing you can do here, if you don't want to use one or the other, let the other get the save. You don't have to have a direct closer if you don't want to. It's not like malpractice to have a kind of closer by committee. We saw the Pirates do it near the end of the season when they removed David Bednar from that position. And you see how important these closers are across baseball. I mean, Emmanuel Clase was historically good this year. Now, obviously, in the postseason, he kind of fell off a little bit, but he was a big reason, if not the biggest reason, why the Cleveland Guardians were such a good team. Because when Emmanuel Clase got in the game, you absolutely knew that the Guardians were winning that game. Devin Williams has that same feeling when he's been in Milwaukee. I mean, you're looking at a guy who had only 14 saves this year, but he had 36 in 2023, 15 in 2022, but he's just been a very good player. Now, he dealt with injuries this past year also, so that was a massive part of this because he only threw 21 and 2/3 innings, which is his second lowest amount of his career. But in 23 and 22, that's what you'd be wanting to get from Devin Williams, and that's what you would be hoping to get in Devin Williams. Obviously, I don't think Devin Williams would cost near as much as Cody Bellinger, but we are seeing some of these pitchers in free agency get a boatload of money. The A's handed out their largest contract in team history to Luis Severino not too long ago, a couple days ago. And Clay Holmes got some pretty decent money from the New York Mets. They're trying to make him a starter, but obviously no, he can be in the bullpen as well. I think Devin Williams, much like Bellinger, solves a lot of problems for this team. He's a consistent guy in the back end of the bullpen. He can be a setup guy if you want him to. He can be a closer if you want him to. He can do both. He's very useful in both spots. But again, much like with Cody Bellinger, are you okay with giving up a potential premium for one season? I think that's the biggest question here. Do you want to give up that much, depending on how much it's going to be, because I don't know how much it's going to be, for just one season of Devin Williams? But if the onus is that they want 2025 to be the year that begins their contention window, yes, you absolutely want to make a move like this. You want to go get a Devin Williams. You want to go get a Cody Bellinger. These are the moves that you want to make. Now, how realistic is Devin Williams? Much like I said, Cody Bellinger. I think the potential of a Devin Williams move to Pittsburgh over a Cody Bellinger move to Pittsburgh is a little bit more likely. I don't think, again, that Devin Williams would cost as much. You're kind of, I think, more okay with moving on from a bullpen arm within the division rather than a pretty good positional player. I just think that's the truth. But Devin Williams and Cody Bellinger, I think, are just both interesting cases because, yeah, they're in the division. It's very unlikely that you trade them within the division. But if you're the Pirates and you have these needs, you absolutely think about it. You at least give them a call. I mean, I don't see how you don't. You have to at least go into it and say, yeah, okay, let's at least call them and see what we can get here, right? Like, I don't see any harm in doing that whatsoever. And if you're the Pirates, I think you shouldn't have any thought process as to, oh, he's in Milwaukee, we just can't get him. You absolutely go and try. But one player that you don't have to worry about at all is a former Cardinal who is in free agency that the Pirates wouldn't have to trade anything to get. And we'll even throw a Red in there too, just to include them as well. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action as the regular season is winding down with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And welcome back, everybody, to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, all the time. Folks, we talked about Devin Williams. We talked about Cody Bellinger. Those would both be trades. Now, when you're looking at free agency and looking at the potential of adding rival players, you obviously have to start considering guys that have played first base, because I think first base is a big need. And, you know, I think that's a big spot to really look at. And you look at Paul Goldschmidt. Paul Goldschmidt has been a name that's popped up numerous times for the Pittsburgh Pirates, seeing as there was actually a report that came out that said that he's only projected to get about $8 million, very much in the Pirates' price range. Goldschmidt, though, already 37 years old, but still had a pretty solid 2024. Not a great 2024 like we're accustomed to seeing from Goldie, but still a 1.3 WAR player, 245 average on the year last season. Still had that 20 home runs threshold with 22 homers and 65 ribbies. OPS at a 716. You'd like to see that come up. It was the lowest OPS of his career. So does that indicate that the decline is on for a guy like Paul Goldschmidt? He'd kind of be that player. Like Christian Walker is my want first baseman very badly, unless they could get a guy like Cody Bellinger. Paul Goldschmidt, to me, is that kind of player that you look at and you say, yeah, okay, he's kind of like the backup option if you can't get a Christian Walker or a Cody Bellinger or somebody else that you'd like at that first base position. Now, would Goldschmidt be terrible for the Pirates? We don't really know. Again, is the decline on? His average went down. Every metric that he had went down from the previous season and the previous seasons before that. But he does have his track record, obviously, as a veteran in Arizona and St. Louis. He does have a track record of just being a pretty decent defensive first baseman, and he's going to hit the ball. That's exactly what Paul Goldschmidt's going to do. He's going to hit for power. He's going to try to get on base. But again, do you want to invest in a 37, 38-year-old first baseman when you have the potential of finding a first baseman of the future, or at least somebody you could have for longer than a year? Because personally, for me, I'm getting tired of seeing these one-year deals for like aging first basemen like Santana and, some of these other guys. I just don't want to see it anymore. I truly don't. I just don't need to see it anymore. I'd rather go get a Christian Walker on a 2 or 3 year deal, bring in Bellinger. And if you're going to bring in Bellinger for a year, that's better than bringing in Goldschmidt for a year. But I still want to mention Paul Goldschmidt just because I do think that he is somebody that could be on the Pirates' radar. He is a veteran presence at the position. And who knows? Maybe he does come back to form if he comes to Pittsburgh. For Cincinnati, this one's a little harder because with Cincinnati, I mean, they're very much like Pittsburgh. I don't think they're really in the market to trade much else. I mean, they traded Jonathan India already. That was a player that I would have loved in Pittsburgh because he would have just supplanted that second base position, but they move on from him already. So after that, I just don't think they're going to make too many trades. So when you look at free agency, you look at a guy like Ty France, who a lot like Paul Goldschmidt would just be kind of like a bargain signing at first base. Didn't have a terrible season between his time with Seattle and Cincinnati, 234 with 13 homers and 51 ribbies. Is a free agent, not going to get a lot of money. He was a negative WAR player, though, and anytime you see that, I just don't really want a negative WAR player, I don't think. And 670 OPS, but you're looking at a guy that on his career, 744 OPS, could be that kind of player if he can regain his form. But again, much like with Paul Goldschmidt, I think Ty France is in the same vein of if the Pirates don't get a Christian Walker or a first baseman that I think that a lot of people would be more happy about, Ty France is one of those players you look at and say, okay, there's your backup option. I think he could be a backup option, much like Paul Goldschmidt. But folks, those are 4 players, one from each team that the Pirates could bring in from their rivals. Will it happen? We'll just have to wait and see. Winter meetings are on Monday. Gary will be back on Monday. I will be back tomorrow to discuss anything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Enjoy your Saturday, folks. Hit the subscribe button. Listen to the show on all of your podcast platforms. And please, 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 please do like, subscribe, share, and comment. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. Thank you so much. And we'll see you on the flip side.